I thought this would be an incredibly easy and straightforward review to make. And I guess it still is, because if you're in the market for a new Switch and the cost savings and extra portability of the Lite are not relevant to you, this is the model you should buy, no question about it. But I'm just far more enamored with this product than I ever expected to be, and I'm really shocked to report that despite the disappointing lack of upgrades on the silicon side, the OLED Switch is a rather transformative improvement that has me enjoying the Switch again in a way that I haven't for a while. Let me put it this way, until we get a true Switch 2 that can output at higher than 1080p, I'll be playing the majority of my Switch games on this in handheld mode. Because I really do think it's a more pleasant experience than playing in docked mode at sub 1080p on a large 4K TV. So let's talk about all the changes and how I've been enjoying them. Just so we're all on the same page, this new Switch does not offer any internal improvements over the pre-existing models. It's the same Tegra X1 setup, and therefore will run games identically. Aside from the refreshed dock design, every upgrade that was made improves only the handheld experience. The most obvious and substantial upgrade here is of course in the name, OLED model, which I might add is a really bizarre and out-of-character name for Nintendo to use, especially with it being so meekly encased in parentheses. Anyway, when it was announced, it had a lot of people scratching their heads. The same 720p resolution, and it's actually larger, so it's less pixel dense. While that is true, to focus solely on it is to be completely ignorant of every other parameter that goes into display quality. The original model has a plastic cover and a massive air gap that gives it this dull, sunken look. Now, I couldn't find any authoritative evidence saying whether the OLED is laminated or not. Putting it under some light, it does seem like there's still a slight gap there. Even still, it's leaps and bounds above the original. They've also gone with a glass cover, but that comes with a caveat. All units have a pre-installed screen protector, and it's not a courtesy. Much like the Galaxy Fold, it's an integral part of the design, and it's not meant to be removed. The reason? For safety in the event that it shatters. Kind of weird, maybe they didn't use high-quality tempered glass, or they're just really worried about children, but it's honestly not noticeable unless you're looking for it. And again, still a huge improvement coming from a purely plastic display cover. With those two changes alone, they've greatly improved clarity, and that's without even accounting for the panel itself, which is frankly much better than I would have expected for a handheld from Nintendo. It is purportedly a Samsung-manufactured panel, and they haven't done anything weird with it. It just looks like any other nice, modern OLED that you'd see on something like a Samsung phone, which sounds like a weird thing to be happy about, but with Nintendo, you just never know. You probably have one on your phone right now, but if you're not familiar with the benefits of OLED, the main advantage is that instead of a pixel layer lit by a separate backlight, each pixel is its own light source, meaning that blacks are truly black, providing a theoretically infinite contrast ratio in addition to wider viewing angles. OLEDs are also typically described as having super vibrant colors, although that really comes down to tuning, and this is where Nintendo surprised the hell out of me. There are two color options buried in the settings now, Vibrant, which is what it comes with, and Normal. Vibrant gives you those punched up, juicy, oversaturated colors that are reminiscent of a Samsung phone with its default settings, while Normal is, I guess, not that. I understand why they made Vibrant the default. It'll probably impress people just by nature of it being so retina burning, but I find it to be just that, too much. It doesn't look natural, reds and greens are like neon, and I turned it off the second I found you could and haven't looked back. With the normal setting, you still get great colors that far outclass the very dull LCD of the original, but with a much more natural and accurate look. Some might actually prefer Vibrant though, so it's something you can play with. Another side benefit of OLED that I don't think a lot of other people are talking about is how fast modern OLEDs tend to be. It's still 60 Hz, but it feels extremely responsive. I don't have any way of testing it, and Nintendo doesn't list specs like this, but I would be shocked if this didn't have a notably quicker response time. So all the upgrades here are welcome, and it all translates into real-life use. I'm super happy with it, and when you compare it with the poor black levels and low contrast of the original, There's absolutely no question that it's a vastly superior display. What was not a seemingly large change was the screen size increase, 7 inches up from 6.2, but it ended up being what pushed this over the edge and made it feel like I could play on it full stop, no TV mode. Certain games just didn't work well for me on the smaller screens of both the original and the Lite, but this one feels like it's adequate for those big full-on console-grade games, and since the body is nearly identical to the original, there's no ergonomic penalty. There's really only two things you could fault this display for: brightness and resolution. I don't have any way of empirically measuring brightness, but to my eye, the two appear to be similar. If anything, the LCD is ever so slightly brighter. Playing outside is not a use case for me, but it still would have been nice if the OLED was maybe 10% brighter. The resolution thing is a complete non-issue to me, but it did stir up some controversy when it was announced. As I mentioned, we have the same 720p resolution, but it's now a lower DPI since the screen is larger. When I covered the announcement, I said that for a device that will spend 99% of its time playing games, it makes no sense to go for some kind of super high resolution display, and even with a full-on Switch 2, I would expect it to be 900p if they even do that. Now that the far more expensive PC Master Race Steam Deck has been announced with a 720p display as well, that gripe has probably been put to rest, and for good reason. The only time I'm really noticing that it's a lower DPI is when I'm on the home screen looking at text with the old model side by side, and that's obviously not the purpose of the device. In literally every other scenario, aka games, it looks better, no contest. Until we get a truly new Switch, I'll probably play most of my Switch games on this in handheld mode. Now that 4K TVs are truly ubiquitous, I find the docked experience of the Switch to be extremely lacking. Many games run at sub 1080p, and that just doesn't look good on a big-ass 4K screen. Handheld mode has always been a better pairing in terms of resolution, but the original Switch's middling panel quality and small size had me opting to play on the TV the majority of the time. Now that display quality is vastly improved and the size is more comfortable, this is a handheld experience that I'm happy to partake in. I'd rather play on this than play on my nice TV at a low resolution. Case and point, Metroid Dread. Dread was of course released alongside the system, so I naturally spent most of my time with the system playing it. I played the shit out of this game, and not once did I feel the desire to put it on my TV, which says a lot. The game seems to be native 720p in handheld mode with no anti-aliasing, so it's extremely sharp looking. The environments tend to be dark, at times pitch black, with splashes of bright color throughout. And it doesn't look the best on the LCD, but it thrives on this system. The extra responsiveness and motion clarity of OLED also felt like a big benefit here for a more fast-paced 2D game. It's an amazing pairing, and I think it's the best way to play the game, which you should, by the way, because it's great. I couldn't put it down. Finally, let's talk about the other various minor improvements made here. It's mostly just nice quality of life stuff. As I mentioned, it's a larger screen in an almost identical body, which does away with the toy-like Amazon Fire tablet look of the original and gives us a more modern device. Those slimmer bezels are now framed by a glossy border, and it's actually metal. The kickstand is also metal, and far larger with a Microsoft Surface-esque hinge design that allows you to prop it up more stably and angle it as you please up to around 150 degrees or so. Big improvement from the wimpy one-setting piece on the original. One of the more curious improvements touted by Nintendo was enhanced audio. It definitely sounds better and distorts less, but it's not impressive or anything. It's more inoffensive. Nintendo recently pushed through an update to allow Bluetooth audio, finally, which is a far bigger improvement than this speaker upgrade if you ask me. Then there's the refreshed dock design. The only technical difference is the removal of the interior USB port, which is now replaced by an Ethernet port that will be much appreciated by competitive Smash players, and not very relevant for anyone else if I'm being honest. Much like the console, it's more visually appealing, and the cable routing hole is easier to work with. The last thing I wanted to briefly mention is battery life. Now, my unit has spent 90% of its time at home where it's never more than a few feet away from a USB-C charger, but regardless, I've observed a notable improvement. Of course, I'm coming from the original poor battery life Switch, and this is advertised as being on par with the silent refresh good battery Switch, so 5.5 hours of Breath of the Wild according to Nintendo. I didn't bother doing any extensive testing myself since every other big outlet has already done so, but it's a respectable statistic and will be a nice bonus for anyone else coming from a pre-refresh model. In the world of consumer electronics, the OLED Switch is a super predictable, competent product with no surprises. But in the wacky world of Nintendo, that's actually a script break and not something that should be taken for granted. Nintendo doesn't really do premium hardware, and for them to just put out a new system that offers no features other than being more luxurious and fixing common complaints is an anomaly for sure. The closest analog is the XL DSi and 3DSs, but I think this is more of an enthusiast option than those ever were, which is kind of uncharted territory for Nintendo. But I have to say that I'm happy to have them offer something like this. It feels fresh, and I want to make sure I reiterate this again. I think it's now the best way to play Switch games. As far as I can see, there's only 3 problems: availability, not living up to the Switch Pro rumor reporting, and the price. The first 2 are uncontrollable circumstances that are no fault of the product itself, but I do take issue with not only the price, but the product lineup. They are going to continue selling the LCD OG Switch for the same $300 that it's been at since 2017, and the OLED slots in above it at $350. Do I think that the OLED is worth the extra $50? Yes, but I don't think it should be this way. Generally, when consoles get a refresh, be it a slim model or in the case of last gen a Pro model, it comes with a price drop. And that makes sense. After years of being on the market, it's depreciated. For example, when the PS4 Pro came out, it replaced the $400 price point of the launch PS4, and then the slim model with the original hardware was $300. Nintendo should have either dropped the LCD model outright, which would be my preference, or drop it to $250. Either way, the OLED model should have slotted in at that $300 price point. The Switch has been out for over 4 years, and in that time has received no permanent price drop, at least in the US. If you ask me, Nintendo is pushing it too much here, and I don't like it. In terms of recommendations, if you don't have a Switch and you don't want the Lite, I think there's no question that you should get this. While I wish it just replaced the original, the $50 price premium is worth it. For existing Switch owners, I think your decision is going to be based on how much you care about this stuff, how much you use your Switch, and frankly, how much $350 is worth to you. For the kind of person that plays it a lot and has had one since 2017, like myself, you're probably going to enjoy this a lot and will find it worth the upgrade. If you have that improved battery life Switch from a year or 2 ago and don't play that much, or just don't really have $350 burning a hole in your pocket, then you'll likely have a more difficult time justifying the purchase, especially considering that a truly next-gen Switch feels possible in the next 2 years or so. For me, though, it was worth the upgrade, more than I thought it would be, and it's made me enjoy Switch games more, which is all that I can ask for. If you enjoyed the video, likes and subscriptions help out a ton, and until next time, thanks for watching.